And then, as you know, one day I discovered an historic and almost priceless artifact, a watch, a Harrison Lesser watch. Found it in the back of a garage. It was like a sign from the gods of commerce. Chapter 3: The Golden Age. For a brief, shimmering moment in the mid-90s, the Trotters had been kings. The novel of their lives had transitioned from a gritty social drama to a glossy jet-set thriller. Anyway, Dell continued, his eyes glazing over with the memory of pure, unadulterated wealth. At first, we didn't know what to do with it. We thought about donating it to the British Museum as a national treasure. We really did. We felt a sense of duty to the crown. We thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Rodney corrected. And then we decided to flog it. Dell grinned. 6.5 million quid. Justin, can you imagine that? 6.5 million of the Queen's finest nuggets. We divvied the dosh up, making sure our Uncle Albert got a nice little drink, bless his old seafaring soul, and we thought of others. We donated to charity. Enormously, of course. We bought a round of drinks for the whole Nag's Head, Rodney whispered. That was our charity work. It felt like a charity, Dell insisted. Have you seen the state of Trigger? He needs all the help he can get. So, eventually, we had to start thinking about our future. We sought out a city stockbroker, a man with a tie thinner than a strand of spaghetti and a brain like a calculator. He advised us to invest in a new and vibrant venture, a Central American market. Dell stood up, pacing the small office. It was attracting massive funds from all over the world. We were making more money than the Royal Mint. We weren't just flat, Justin. We were ascendant. Chapter 4: The Fall of the Empire. The flashback in Dell's mind was vivid. He remembered the heat of the Caribbean, the smell of expensive sun cream, and the feeling of a platinum credit card in his pocket, a card that felt like it had the power to stop the rotation of the earth if he swiped it hard enough. He remembered Raquel, his significant other, looking like a movie star in a wide-brimmed hat. He remembered young Damien, the fruit of his loins, playing on the deck of a yacht. He remembered Rodney and Cassandra, looking like they finally belonged in a world where the wine didn't come from a box. And then the music changed. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was the sound of a phone not ringing. It was the sight of a computer screen flickering with red numbers that shouldn't have been there. She's into superstitions. The radio had been playing in the hotel lobby. Livin' La Vida Loca. It turned out, Dell said, his voice dropping an octave, that negotiations between the Central American countries had collapsed, wiped out. The market didn't just crash. It evaporated. It was like someone had pulled the plug on the ocean. We'd even paid for the hotel on a credit card. Rodney added, the ghost of the trauma still visible in his eyes. A credit card which was withdrawn while we were still at the breakfast buffet. I was halfway through a bowl of exotic fruit, and suddenly I was an international pauper. Dell nodded solemnly. But Derek Trotter is, if nothing else, a creative businessman. I came up with a solution. We had to leave. Fast. We ran, Rodney said. We literally ran for the airport while the concierge was still looking for the bill. Chapter 5. The Financial Wilderness. The return to the UK was not met with a ticker-tape parade. The news of the Trotter collapse had traveled faster than a Peckham rumor. How long did it take for the news to hit the UK? Justin asked, scribbling notes furiously. About as long as it took for someone to push a button on the internet. Dell sighed. Suddenly, all our so-called business associates wouldn't return our calls. We were cast into a financial wilderness. It was like the desert, but with more rain and less sand. And then there was Mike. Rodney reminded him. Dole's face darkened. Mike Fisher, the landlord of the Nag's Head. A man who had seen the Trotters as his ticket out of the pub trade. Mike invested his life savings in our venture, Dell explained. He actually remortgaged the pub. He's in prison now, awaiting trial. The fraud squad claims he tried to recoup his losses by embezzling the brewery. Never was a man more innocent. He confessed to everything, Dell, Rodney pointed out. He was under duress, Dell shouted. The pressure of the brewing industry is immense. The narrative shifted to the waiting room of the court. The atmosphere was thick with the smell of cheap coffee and the nervous sweat of Peckham's finest. Denzel was pacing, wearing the marble floor down. Uncle Albert was sitting there, looking like a weary old owl. Trigger was. Well, Trigger was staring at a wall, possibly having a conversation with his own shadow. Trig, if I go in there and tell the truth, Denzel had said, Dell and Rodney are going to be spending the next 5 years sharpening Jeffrey Archer's pencils. I'm going to tell them I hear voices. Trigger had replied, with the terrifying sincerity of the truly confused. Chapter 6. The Wrong Side of the Grave. The funeral of Uncle Albert should have been a moment of dignified sorrow. Instead, it was a master class in Trotter-esque absurdity. The family stood in the biting cold of a coastal cemetery. Dell was genuinely heartbroken. Albert had been their anchor, the man who had survived the Battle of the Baltic only to be nearly killed by Dell's cooking. I feel bad, Dell whispered to Rodney as they stood by the grave, leaving him here on his own while we were off globe-trotting. We should have taken him to Barbados. He didn't have a passport, Dell, Rodney reminded him. He thought the Germans were still looking for him. They stood amongst a group of strangers. A woman named Marion was crying. A man named Roland was complaining about Albert's wartime sagas. God, he did go on, didn't he? Roland sneered. Never bloody stopped. The John Wayne of the East End. Dole's blood began to simmer. It reached boiling point. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing. You've got to remember that a lot of blokes lost their lives for our liberty, just so that 50